Hey everybody, welcome back. I've got something really special to share with you today. If you don't follow me on Twitch and if you don't follow me on Twitter, you might not realize that on Friday, February 19, I got the opportunity to have two members of the Marvel's Avengers team on my stream to talk about the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you listen to the entire conversation between me and Hannah MacLeod, one of the game writers of Avengers. Andy Wong, the community manager and social media manager, is also on the call, but for the most part, he's just there to be a part of the community. So the conversation is mainly between me and Hannah, and we talk about narrative, about storytelling, about comics, about the characters. I took some questions from my community beforehand. I gave everybody about a week to ask the things that they wanted to ask, because one of the things that Crystal Dynamics asked me to do was to submit my questions beforehand. So that way, Hannah or Andy would have an opportunity to prepare an answer, because some of these are deep questions. We asked a lot of in-depth questions about the relationship between characters, about story moments, those things specifically. So I'm not taking a lot of questions from the chat during the interview because we submitted those all beforehand. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of questions that they want to ask about the game to Crystal Dynamics, but this interview was narrowly focused on writing and storytelling and narrative, like I said, which is why we had one of the game writers on the stream. Now, to address something that might be on your mind, I wasn't paid anything or given anything to do this. This was an opportunity that I sought out, that I reached out to Andy about, because I was genuinely interested. I wanted the opportunity to talk about the story in the game and the characters and comics with a member of the team. That was the point of this interview. Some people wanted me to ask questions about the future of the game or about where the game is headed and things like that, and that's just not what this interview was for. With all of that in mind, I hope you can enjoy the interview. I think that Hannah is amazing, and you can tell just by talking to her that she has a lot of love for this game and the characters in the game. All I'd ask is that if you decide to comment on the video, and honestly I'd love it if you did, please consider kindness as an option. Hannah and Andy and everyone at Crystal Dynamics are all people. They're all putting their heart and soul into making this game. And I'm a person too. And if you leave a comment about this, that's something mean, I'm probably going to get a notification about it, and I'm going to have to read that. So consider that. Consider what the interview was, what I was trying to do, and that we're just all people trying to talk about things that we love. Thanks. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. We are joined here today, as you guys might know, by Hannah MacLeod and Andy Wong, both of Crystal Dynamics. Hannah MacLeod is a game writer for this wonderful game, Play Avengers, and Andy Wong is the community manager and social media manager. So today, I'm going to stop the music actually. Today we are going to be just talking about game stuff, mainly story. Mainly the story. So
Yes.
I'm excited. Hello, Hannah. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. How are you guys?
Good. Excited. It's been a
Good.
while since I've done one of these.
It's been forever since I've done one of these because I have never done one of these. And now the dogs are barking. I am just having a day. But thank you so much for deciding to be here and hang out and answer questions. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to have you here. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll take all the questions from your dogs too if they have any.
Yeah. They seem to have an absolute ton of questions. So yeah, Andy, you mentioned that you kind of wanted to talk about something at the top. So yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So just real quick, everyone. We've all seen the reactions to the award table, and as much as I love Hawkeye and everything. I just want to let everyone know that we don't hold content or information back from the community for funsies. We never do. case in point is a deep dive. Once we had a solid release date for Clint in mind, we just want to get the word out there ASAP, and we know, the date is a little further than anyone was expecting, but we just wanted to get that date out there right away. So just having said that, we know people want more information. We know people want a roadmap and everything, and that is still in making good progress. So there's just a small update there. We hear you guys. We want to give you guys as much information as we can, but the last thing we want to do is give you guys incorrect information. So with that, I still hope that you guys enjoyed the Hawkeye section. I know I loved it, but I love Hawkeye in general. So yeah, I love you guys. Thanks for all the feedback for it, and a lot to take back to the team, everyone. And just a little thing, there is a new, because this is taking the place of our usual weekly thing. There is a new Iron Man outfit coming as soon as next week. I learned my lesson last time from not giving out more than I need to, but there is a new Iron Man outfit coming as soon as next week, hopefully next week.
That's exciting for me to hear. I had no idea. I mean, I'm not an Iron Man main. People who've been here definitely know that I am not an Iron Man main. But new outfits are always exciting. So
wait, who do you main?
Kamala, 100%. Kamala,
man after my own heart.
Kamala, since the beta, since the very first day. She is. I actually think I own the very first comic she was created in.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I have. If you can, I don't know if you can see too well, but like right there is just the beginning of my comic boxes. I have a ton of them.
That's amazing.
So much so that that I don't really have room for a lot else in this room. So, Hannah, if you don't mind, can you... So, I know you as game writer from having talked to Andy, but like, can you tell me, maybe this is too silly of a question, but can you tell me how a game like this is written? Because it's huge, right?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It's a huge thing, and I'm curious how it works.
Yeah, 6 playable characters is a little big.
Yeah.
So I'm one of a team of writers / narrative designers on the project. And we have a narrative director, John Stafford, and then we have a bunch of writers, both in-house and that we contract with, because there is so much to work on. And it's interesting because a lot of people assume that we kind of like take a character and each of us write for particular characters, but it really doesn't work like that. It's much more of we take a level, or we work on an arc of the story, or that kind of thing more often. And we also, our writing team is very much of the opinion that everyone has something important to say. And so we'll throw scripts to each other all the time and be like, is this any good? Is this terrible? Could you reaffirm that I have earned this job? Thanks. So it's a lot of us passing scripts around. And it's gotten to the point where we often forget who wrote what. A lot of the time, and so people will ask like, oh, what happened behind this particular scene, or who did this particular scene, and we're like, was that you? Was that me? I don't remember, because we've just all pretty much looked at everything, which is really cool. It means we all feel very much like proud parents of the whole game, because we've pretty much gotten to touch everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering if I know a little bit about how like a TV show is written, and I was wondering if it was something sort of similar to that, and it almost kind of sounds like it might be in terms of
only. The major difference is that we are still writing while everything is in production and while things are being made. So TV, they generally get the script and then they send it off.
Yeah.
But for games, because gameplay is really the core of a game, like you can have a game with an incredible story, and if the gameplay isn't good, people aren't going to play it. And so we want to be able to be very agile and be able to adjust the story to fit the gameplay as it develops.
Yeah.
So we're working we are not pencils down until much later in the process than like a TV writer would be.
Well, that definitely answers one of the questions I was going to ask. Was if you stop as the game is starting to be like developed, but I guess not. I mean, it makes sense that
No, no. I actually really enjoy that part of it because it means that you can be very flexible and work with the entire team. You're not all
Mhm.
siloed off into a room together coming up with the story. Because good story ideas can come from anywhere, and getting to work with design and gameplay and programming and everything lets us really tell a more meaningful story that feels good on the sticks to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually really enjoy the challenge of having to adapt a story to fit a changing gameplay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of sounds like I put this in one of the questions I said, but it kind of sounds like with a film production where you're there on the set on the day, and maybe something changes, whether it's something an actor would come up with or something like that. But
Exactly.
something changes on the day, and then you've gotta adjust the script to go with that. So that's, I mean, it's like high stakes writing versus
Yeah.
versus sitting in like I do, where I sit in my living room and just work on a novel, that kind of thing.
Hey, that is also a very difficult kind of writing. I don't have the attention span to do that. But yeah, so it's a lot of writing on the fly and problem solving and being able to make something still make sense if suddenly an entire level has changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of that.
Yeah, it's like they always say that writing is just basically rewriting over and over again.
Yes,
So
definitely.
that makes sense. And it's funny that you said, going back a little bit, you said something like where you when you're working as a group, you're always like, does this suck? And I feel like even outside of game writing, that is just a universal writer's experience of like,
I would say probably, yeah.
of please give me your honest feedback, but also please tell me
Please
it
don't.
doesn't. Yeah. Please tell me it does not suck because I spent so much time on it.
Exactly.
So yeah, I get that for sure. Well, thank you for explaining that. I don't know. I had no idea how games were
There's
written,
a lot
so.
of mystery behind it for sure. That people, especially when I tell people, "Oh, I write for video games," they go, "People write those?" So there's definitely there's a lot of mystery about game development and what game writers do. So I totally get it.
Yeah, I had a moment one time where I found out that one of my favorite comic book writers, Rick Remender, wrote the game Bulletstorm, and I was like,
Wow.
that's a weird thing to think about. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of mystery there. I don't know if
Mhm.
before that moment if I even really considered the writing process for games, because
Yeah,
the credits in games are long and
lengthy and
yeah.
skippable.
I was gonna say skippable, but then I felt a little bad about it.
It's okay.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of dive into some story questions because I think people here want to maybe hear more about Avengers than just my thoughts about writing in general,
Sure.
potentially. So you have there's six main characters, or six characters to start the game, like we said.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are big names, but
Yes.
if you ask me, I would say that Kamala is probably the main character. First of all, is that am I?
That is accurate.
Okay,
That is, I consider Kamala the protagonist of the main
That-
campaign.
That is okay. Okay, I guess I don't know what I would have done if you would have disagreed with me. That would have been I would have been. Anyways, can you talk about that decision? Like, what led to rather than starting with a Cap or a Thor or an Iron Man, what brought us Kamala?
Yeah. So I actually was brought into the project after that decision was made, but from what I gather, she was the plan as the protagonist all along.
Oh.
That was what really interested Crystal in telling an Avengers story. She's really popular in the comics. She's such a unique and fresh take on a superhero, and her perspective is so different from, for example, what we're seeing in the movies right now or anything like that, because she's so new to superheroing. So she doesn't have the cynicism, maybe the jaded ness of the other characters, and she really enjoys her powers, which I think is really important for a video game, that the kind of the main character, the protagonist, and the player are kind of aligned there.
Yeah.
Where they both really enjoy, they really want to use their superpowers, they really enjoy that. So it's a lot harder to get players aligned with a character that, you know, has given up their powers, or doesn't want to use them, or is maybe a little jaded about being a superhero, when the player itself is like, this is so cool, I'm a superhero.
Yeah, that's a great point. My thinking about that storytelling device, I guess, I guess is how I would describe it, was it's kind of like, what's the movie? I think it's Animal House, where you start from the perspective of an outsider, and that brings the, I was going to say viewer, but in this case it brings the player into the game as the main character is also being brought into the world of the Avengers. And I thought it was,
for sure, yeah,
I thought it was a really, again, storytelling device makes it sound a little cheap, but I mean that in a good way, because it's you know, you got to start the story in a way that brings everybody on board.
oh, for sure. And I think she's also very relatable in that way. She's such a fan of the Avengers, and I feel like anyone coming into this game had that same feeling of,
Yeah.
you know, if I got to meet the Avengers, that'd be pretty cool. And I that just makes her super relatable, and super, it's a little easier to kind of get on board with a brand new character if she's coming from a place that fans can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that, because that moment is like, with meeting the Avengers, even outside of superheroing, that, like, at that A-Day event, that's kind of the first moment we get of all the characters, and we get to see everybody's personalities in really interesting ways, I think. And one of the moments I want to talk about, because when I first saw this moment, the first time I played, and I played through the campaign twice, because I have it on PC and but when I first saw this moment, I was like, yep, this is a story that I like. And the moment was where I think she's at the cap display at A-Day, and basically a couple bullies come up and try to gatekeep her. I would say, out of fandom, I guess. So I don't know. Is there any information about, like, the evolution of the scene? Because I just think it's such a good scene.
Well, I can tell you that scene was written by one of our writers, my lead, Nicole Martinez. So she definitely came to it with a lot of, shall we say, knowledge of gatekeeping, both in the game space and the comics space. And I think the perspective of all of the scenes in A-Day is that we wanted to show the Avengers being seen by someone they haven't seen themselves by previously. So they're seeing themselves from a different point of view. So part of the reason that we wanted scenes like that with Kamala, of showing what the Avengers mean to her, is so that they can overhear it.
Yeah.
So we wanted Cap to see himself and see words he's said and how he's come across to other people. And we wanted that to have an impact on him, even though Kamala's young, even though he doesn't know her very well. And we were trying to find ways in which we could show Kamala's perspective on the Avengers and what it means to be a fan of them, and what it means to be in a community of fans of them. And so really all of the scenes in A-Day are in service to that, of you know, the Avengers are kind of at their peak at A-Day. They're kind of a little full of themselves. And so to get to show them and sort of humanize them a little bit by seeing themselves through this little girl's eyes was really important to us, for sure. And, you know, with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek about gatekeeping and how really the Avengers don't belong to just one type of fan. They belong to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny that when we talk about, like, kind of seeing them at their peak, and then we get the Iron Man scene where he comes in with his full Iron Man flair, I guess.
Yes.
And that definitely feels like very peak Iron Man to me. But it's really interesting to kind of compare that A-Day moment to later in the story, because they almost, like, they see themselves in Kamala in that moment, but then everything happens, and they kind of forget what it means to be
Exactly.
a hero until they see it in Kamala.
Exactly.
And
She is their reminder of what is good about being super and what is good about being heroic.
yeah, and I don't know. I just I guess maybe I'm leading to the point where it's not a question and more just like it's a great way to tell that that story. So
Thanks.
less of a question, more of a compliment. I don't know.
I will take it.
So in terms of telling a story with maybe a character that people don't know as well, we know kind of why that decision was made, but like, what does it take to make people who don't know Kamala, maybe have never seen Miss Marvel before at all, what does it take to make people love that character? Like, what kind of thoughts went into that?
I think that was. It's interesting that you describe it that way, because I remember saying way back early in the process that I had two goals with this game. I want people to have fun, and I want people to love Kamala.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really went into it with those two pillars for us in mind, because we all really love Kamala as a character. I think she was the first time in superhero comics where I really saw myself. She was a fangirl. She wrote fan fiction. She was so normal, and it was definitely like my opening into comics and loving superhero comics. Now I've read so many. It's so weird to think about. And I think, again, what we needed to do was show her in relation to these sort of touch point characters that people already loved and were already on board with. So, for example, when she meets Thor for the first time, she gets a little speechless at first, which is, I think, what all of us would do in the event that Thor suddenly landed in front of us. But even as she becomes a young adult and as she meets the Avengers again, I think it's aligning her with what players are feeling in any given moment. And I think it didn't involve changing who Kamala was. It was just showing them that Kamala and the player are pretty closely aligned in how they're going to feel from moment to moment, because that's just who she is as a character. She's so positive, and she believes really deeply in being a hero means something to people, and it's more than just having superpowers. It means something to give people hope and that sort of thing. So it was a lot of touchstones of making sure that this was Kamala's story in every moment, that it's how she relates to the Avengers. It's how she relates to having superpowers. And it was always checking back in to make sure that we were still being true to her character throughout, because I think she's just lovable as she is. And we just wanted to make sure that we showed that off in as many places as we could.
Yeah, I definitely I can't remember at this point already if I said this before we started or once we started, but I think I own the first comic that was it G. Willow Wilson that wrote wrote the first Kamala story, and I think I own that first issue.
Yeah.
And it's one of my prized issues for sure. Yeah, it's interesting that Kamala was like your first foray, or the first experience where you really loved comics. I think mine, I don't know if you can tell from like the wall behind me, might have been Captain Marvel by Kelly Sue DeConnick.
Yes, and that is Nicole's favorite series as well. She's a big fan.
It's so good, and you know her Kelly Sue's husband is Matt Fraction, who obviously writes the
incredible Hawkeye, yes.
Hawkeye, which I have the whole series behind me as well. And when you guys said that My Life as a Weapon was one of the inspirations, I was like, yep, I'm on board. I'm on board. Oh, can I actually ask a question that's a little off book? I thought of something. Does Kamala have any healing abilities in the comics, or is that just added for the gameplay?
She actually does have healing abilities in the comics. it's part of her whole hunger thing. When she is healing, or when she got hurt really badly and is healing, she gets extremely hungry because she's using up all her energy to heal her body.
Okay.
So that's actually a thing in the comics that we pulled out, is her healing factor.
Okay.
Healing other people is a gameplay thing.
Okay,
But healing herself is definitely from the comics.
Gotcha. Okay, I was just curious. I realized it's been, man, when did that come out? 2015. So it's probably been quite a few years since I read the Miss Marvel issues that I have. Okay, so let's see, what other questions. So another thing that I really liked about the story. I guess I can't say one thing because I've already said quite a few. One thing that I really liked about the story was that there was a lot of nods to the past, and in terms of Avengers stories. So, for example, Cap is presumed dead, but not actually dead. Sorry for the spoilers there, everybody. And I feel like I've seen that in Cap stories before. But then there was also things that felt brand new to me. And so I'm curious what it was like trying to decide between like drawing from the past and creating something new, and how to mix those two elements into a new story.
Yeah, that was definitely a big part of the project. I think the thing we wanted to do that was really new and that gave us sort of new ground to cover was A-Day and the A-Day disaster. I think that we really made wholly our own, because it meant that everything that happened after that is going to be something you haven't seen before, but it's informed by 70 years of comics history. So how we decided how each character reacted to the disaster, what happened in the 5-year gap for each of them, was totally informed by how they've reacted to situations in the comics. And so we really use the comics as a touch point for their decision making, for their characterization. And we had conversations a lot together, just trying to do their normal everyday things. Like, if Tony suddenly didn't have his entire company, where would he live? Where would he go? What would he do? And we were always passing around that based on, how he's behaved in the comics when those sorts of situations happen to him. So it was everything is informed by the comics, but I think we tried to really make it our own by making the inciting event something you hadn't seen before that really puts them on their back foot.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the tightrope that we walked as we were doing things, because we love giving people nods to comic book stories that they've read before, but we also know that a lot of people coming into this may not have read the comics. So we're hoping that maybe it inspires people to check them out, because there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the comics that we are giving nods to. Maybe characters that they weren't super familiar with will seem kind of more interesting, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was definitely a balancing act.
I just thought of something that I don't think I ever really thought of. In terms of guiding people to check out comics that kind of relate to the story. Obviously, for some characters, it's obvious that the comics that you collect in the game are comics that relate to the story. So, like the Miss Marvel comic is the one that you find in the game, that sort of thing. But is that true for other characters? Like, if I collect a Cap comic in the game, does that relate to maybe how he's told in this game, or is it just random issues that were selected?
It is not random issues. We definitely have a lot of conversations about which issues we want to include and which ones inspire which storylines and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's just we're really big fans of that particular comic, and maybe it's not informing exactly what's happening in the story, but we just like it a lot, and we want other people to check it out. So yeah, there's a lot of discussions, lengthy discussions. We're all a bunch of nerds at Crystal Dynamics who really like comic books. So there is always lots and lots of discussion going into that stuff. And in any way that we can make more nerds and make more people who are into the comic books as well, like, all the better.
Yeah, absolutely. A little detraction here from the questions specifically about the game. What are now that you've been reading so many comics to write these stories? What are some of your recommendations outside of the ones in the game?
Maybe outside of the ones in the game,
or it can be the ones in the game that maybe you think people aren't reading enough. I don't know.
Well, So I encountered this one, and it
Mhm.
is in no way related to anything. But I got
Yeah.
an okay from Andy that I could mention it.
Okay.
There's a Tales of Suspense run where Clint, Hawkeye, and the Winter Soldier, Bucky, team up because Black Widow's supposed to be dead, and then it turns out she's not dead, and so they're like trying to figure out what's going on with her. And it's like the most hilarious buddy cop set of issues that I think I've ever read. It's so funny because they're both in the comics ex-boyfriends of Black Widow, and so they don't like each
Oh.
other. And it's I didn't know any because obviously in the movies they don't say anything remotely close to that. And so getting to read it and have them, it's basically Clint thinks they're in a rivalry. Bucky thinks he's already won. And so it's so funny. I love it so much. I think it's 5 issues of Tales of Suspense. And it's, I think, called Hawkeye and the Winter Soldier. That's probably one of my favorites that I just discovered randomly while going through Marvel Unlimited.
Ooh.
But really, I honestly, I just want to talk to more people about comics. So, like, you mentioned Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. I think that's so great. I would also check out the Kate Bishop stuff because I love her.
Oh yeah.
She's so great. She's so funny. I've started to get more and more into the team stuff, like Young Avengers and Champions and all of that stuff, especially. And those are really, really fun. I think the best part of getting into comics is when you get to the point where those big events mean something to you because you know all of the players involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all of a sudden like, oh, I know the impact of all of this because these 2 characters have never gotten along, and this is how they, when you turn into like such a major comic book nerd like that. So that Tales of Suspense run is one of my favorites. I love Matt Fraction Hawkeye. I really like Squirrel Girl by Ryan North,
Ooh. Okay.
which is a deep cut, but I love it. It's so meta. I'm definitely a meta girl. I love Deadpool. I really like self-referential humor. So yeah, those would probably be my top ones. I'm also really into the Shuri comic, which, I mean, her getting her own run is already really cool, but it's
Yeah.
also a very deep dive into Wakanda and kind of what it's about and what it means to be female and in power. And so, yeah, that I just threw a bunch of titles at you, but
That was
I really like comics.
that was so many good recommendations, chat. I hope you wrote all of those down. Sorry, one more. I know I sent you questions beforehand so you could like prepare and stuff, and now I'm just going off book here. But have you read Uncanny X-Force by Rick Remender by any
I
chance?
have not, and now I'm going to write it down because now I need to.
Because if you like Deadpool, I think
Mm-hmm.
Rick Remender maybe writes my favorite Deadpool. Like he's
All right.
he's like just laugh out loud funny. There are so many good Deadpool scenes. I for a while before I did this, I was an Apple Store employee.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one issue somewhere where Deadpool throws his phone into a helicopter to try to like, because he's like, oh, I need to track it with the GPS, and he's like, good thing I paid for Apple Care, and that was such a insane moment as an Apple employee who also loves reading comics. Anyways, yes, by the way, anytime you want to talk comics, just like, I'm here. I am always willing to talk comics, even though because I do this all the time now. I have not read a lot of comics lately, to be honest. But
it's okay. I forgive you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So, I guess another question that I actually wrote down and sent to you so you could prepare for was that there are a lot of different like character dynamics and relationships between the different characters.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are some of the best, or some of your favorite, or strongest, or most interesting, even?
Yes. I would say one that's a little bit unsung because it doesn't come up a lot is the relationship between Captain America and Black Widow in ours, because she is kind of the second in command. And so when Cap dies, quote unquote, spoilers, she really feels like she's failed him and failed as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like how their relationship develops when he comes back and she realizes that it wasn't her failure. And there's this scene between them right after he comes back that kills me every time I watch it, because Laura Bailey and Jeff Shine just like they're incredible. But where she's trying to apologize for what happened, and he's being Cap and trying to help her through kind of all of the emotions that she's dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really like that relationship. We when we're talking about stories about the Avengers in our writer chat, we like to think about kind of the more domestic stuff that they might be up to. And so we have this idea that maybe Cap and Widow, like, they'll go get coffee together and just sort of stress about being leaders and how much pressure that is. And, so that they can stay cool and in charge when they're among all the rest of the Avengers. So I really love their relationship. And then I think the one that I'm attached to the most is Kamala and Tony, because I love anything that sort of brings Tony down a peg, makes him realize that, there's people other than himself out there. And I think he's so awkward around her because she's so genuine, and he's the opposite of that. So I really love scenes with them together where she can kind of take him down to size and make him be a bit more genuine and earnest. So those are probably my two favorites.
I guess I never considered the fact that, like, Kamala is 100% sincere and Tony is more like 100% ironic,
Exactly.
or something like that. That is a very interesting relationship. So, oh, and sorry, one thing I wanted to touch on that you said that Black Widow felt like she failed as a leader, and I think that's really interesting because I told you I have the game twice, so I'm replaying. I'm replaying through the Kate story again on the PlayStation, and I noticed that Cap actually tells Kate that he thinks he failed by not preparing them to be without him. And
exactly.
Now that you say that, it's a really interesting back and forth, give and take situation between the two of them.
Yeah, I think they really connect on that. They feel a lot of responsibility, and Cap thinks he needs to prepare the world for a world without him, versus Widow thinks she never deserved being a leader in the first place because of her history, because of, who Cap is. And so when she's suddenly given the reins and something bad happens, she feels like, oh, this is all of the things that I thought were going to happen if I was put in charge, and now it's happened. But really, they're both great leaders. So they kind of need each other to remind them of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like we said earlier, I think a lot of this game is heroes reminding other heroes that what it means to be a hero, which I think is a very interesting thing. Okay, let's see what else we could do. Maybe we should go to some of the submitted questions. 'Cause I've only asked the ones that I wrote so far, and I made people submit questions, so perhaps I should go through them. So. Lysadin, a member of, unfortunately, because, I asked my community, these are all going to be from the community as of a week or so ago. But who's your favorite character to write? Lysadin wants to know.
Ooh, it's a tie between Tony or Kamala. I'm a huge Tony fan from the movies, and I love sarcasm and wit. But Kamala is more like myself, so she's a little bit easier to slip into because she's just super excited all the time. So I would say it's a tie between those two, because it's hard for me to pick because I like them so much.
Awesome. Lightning 1437, maybe it's 1437, I don't know. Anyway, wants to know if it's difficult with so many different characters, giving them all their own time to shine. That feels unique and personal and special and all that, but also like a big moment.
It was so hard, but we needed to focus it in terms of in relation to Kamala's arc. How can we give each of them a time to shine? We were always thinking about it and making sure, is this a moment for, Widow fans? They're getting their moment. Is this a moment for Thor fans getting their moment? We were always thinking about it, and it was definitely hard, but I think Kamala really centered all of that, and it made sure that, if we were giving them a moment, it was going to be in relation to where Kamala is at in her story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just thought of something that I addressed the Cap feeling like he failed, but I thought of something else. You mentioned really enjoying thinking about like the characters when they're not being Avengers, like Cap and Widow getting a coffee, and I think that's really interesting because that's like the pitch for the Matt Fraction Hawkeye run. I think
Exactly.
I think that's almost exactly how he pitched it. The opening to the story says this is what he does when he's not being an Avenger.
Yeah.
So I think that's very fun. Let me see. So we actually had two people who asked this one. Umbrasa and the old drunk guy both wanted to know. I may be paraphrasing their questions a little bit, but they both wanted to know how much freedom you guys had when writing the characters.
Well, it's a mix of things. We had freedom in terms of our story and the situations we put them in, but these characters have been established over decades, and so when it came to freedom, it was the situations we were putting them in, and maybe their reactions are a little bit different than what we've seen in the comics, but it's still got to be informed by who these characters are. And I think it felt freeing because they were so set, if that makes sense. Like, we know how Tony is going to be in whatever situation we're going to throw at him. So it was freeing in that we were like, okay, this is who Tony is. Now let's throw MODOK at him and see what happens. So it was freedom. Like, it's not like Marvel was breathing down our necks. They were collaborators who wanted to see what we would do with these established characters. They wanted to see what new situations we could put them in. And yeah, it was a very cool dynamic. I know some people think writing for existing IP can be a little daunting because there's all of this expectation going into it, but it was kind of comforting that we could fall back on the fact that we know who these characters are, we really love them, and no matter what situation they're in, we can really figure out how they're going to behave.
Yeah, I actually until that moment probably would have been one of the people who was worried that it would be the opposite of freeing writing those characters, but I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Knowing how a character is, for the most part, is probably does give you some freedom to explore more, maybe even more far out stories because the character remains the same.
Yeah, and some maybe relationships that the comics haven't explored because we know the characters so well. So now it's a matter of, okay, if we throw these two characters together, what would they be like? Yeah.
We definitely had some of those fun kind of buddy cop might not be the term, but the buddy stories like in the beginning with Hulk and Kamala was
definitely
was a fun little buddy story for sure. Okay, so Suki is okay. Wants to, I guess it's a statement and then a question. So I was gonna say wants to know, and then I realized that wouldn't work. Okay, so Suki is okay says, my favorite part of this Avengers interpretation is the focus on family. In others Avengers tellings, that family dynamic has never really been captured like it has in this game. As the roster grows, are we going to see the family dynamic continue and expand?
Oh my God. Okay, so when I saw this question, I was so excited because the writing team is listening to this right now. So hi guys. We actually have a family tree for the Avengers that we work off of.
Whoa.
And yeah, it's an actual thing. And it's all in relation to Kamala as kind of the little sister. And so when we add characters, we do actually talk about where it will fit in the family tree. So yes, as we introduce more characters, the family dynamic will continue because that comes up immediately whenever we introduce a character. I couldn't believe it that someone else has picked up on that. That just makes me really happy. So like we know Tony is the weird uncle. And we think of Cap very much as like the dad. We think sense. Bruce is the mom. Because he's the warrior, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm very happy that was picked up on because yeah, we have an actual family tree that we contribute to whenever we're thinking of adding a new character.
Well, that was not something I expected to learn today. So that's
there's an Avengers family tree. It's a thing.
That's amazing. I hope eventually we get a chance to see that. Maybe that would be.
Maybe.
I don't know if we can convince you that we would like to see this family tree, but that I mean Amazing insight from Suki. That is a very, very good insight.
Yeah, I'm so glad someone picked up on it.
Okay, a few more questions that I gathered previously. So Pewter Odin wants to know your favorite part of the story and why.
Okay. They feel like my babies, so
Okay.
I feel like I'm neglecting ones, but I would say when Cap and Tony reunite in space is probably my favorite part of the story. It was very emotional to work on because it was such a big moment. And I also really like space. I'm kind of I'm a space fan. I like sci-fi. So that was really fun to kind of play into. And I just really loved that moment. I recently read an article, I think, where someone talked about that moment as kind of when they think they're going to die and they admit things to each other. That was a moment that we thought really long and hard about. And yeah, I really, really like the whole space sequence in general because it's really Tony being genuine, like he can't help himself because he cares so much about Cap and thought he was dead for 5 years. So that's probably my favorite. And it was one that we couldn't talk about for the longest time. So I've been sitting on it forever because we didn't want to spoil the game. But spoilers, Cap's not dead.
What? Yeah, I was actually thinking. My wife and I just rewatched. We just rewatched Endgame, and
oh yeah,
when I saw that moment in I think it was at the beginning of the Hawkeye deep dive, right? I think that space moment was in there. When I saw that, I was like, wait, this reminds me a lot of the moment in Endgame, and I thought that was a really interesting. I mean, I assume they were not created with knowledge of each other, but I just thought it was a very interesting moment. So
yeah, I think everyone agrees that Tony really needs to be put to extremes before he can really be honest with himself. And so when we get to that moment, it's always really interesting to see what comes out.
Yeah, and that in that moment we also get to see Tony kind of looking up to someone too, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, Cap, why would you do this? So many people died, and it's a tough moment. It's a hard little moment. So yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, Nolan North absolutely nails it. So.
Do you have any other moments that?
This is a shout out to my fellow narrative designer Keanu. He's in the Netherlands, but we designed the Anthill space together, which is where the where the Resistance have set up their base, and where Hank Pym is, and so we're very attached to that space. There's a lot of stories going on between the NPCs in that space that we're very attached to. We kind of gave them interior lives and things like that. So if you are playing it again, stand around and listen to some of the background because we actually worked really hard to make sure that the Resistance felt alive and there were things going on that had nothing to do with the Avengers. So I'm really attached to that space. It also let us really expand Inhumans and all the different varieties of powers and what it means to be an Inhuman. So that Anthill space is very close to my heart.
Fair enough. Do they don't make it on the family tree though, right?
No, unfortunately the NPCs are unnamed, but nevertheless we felt vehemently about their relationships to each other.
Fair enough. Okay, so Virtual Sean wanted to know, how do you handle strong storytelling and world building versus player agency? So as an example, you can make this perfect story, and then a player, theoretically, maybe not in this game, because I think the first time when you play through the story, you can't actually skip the cutscenes, I don't think. But theoretically, you could make this beautiful story and a player could just skip it. How do you handle that?
Oh, well, for one, I am the kind of person who will skip it when I play other games.
Interesting.
So there is that. So knowing, who I am as a player, I need to accept that. But I also think that one of the things that you need to do as a narrative designer is understand that the story can sometimes be secondary to the gameplay experience and let that be okay. Because I think, again, going into this, we wanted people to have fun. We don't want them to be bogged down by 8 cinematics in a row. And so sometimes the way to tell the story is going to be to let the players play it. And also, it helps. You can sometimes solve story problems using things other than the story tools.
Interesting.
So, like, it might be that you can really see Kamala coming into her own and accepting her powers by playing as her, rather than having a cinematic tell you those things. It helps that game development is so collaborative. So sometimes cinematic is really expensive, but we could do this thing in the gameplay that gets across the same thing, and it's much cheaper. I think it's just accepting that narrative can sometimes be secondary, and that's totally okay if it means that the experience is great for the player.
Yeah.
But yes, I admit it. I have skipped cutscenes before.
Ooh.
I am a traitor.
Ooh,
I am so sorry. But at the same time, like, I get it when players do it. I totally understand. The playing is the thing. And I hope that they can be a nice balance between each other, and that sometimes cinematics can be a nice break if you've had a ton of gameplay one after another. I think you come to accept that and almost enjoy it, if that makes sense. Enjoy when the story comes across when someone's on the sticks and someone's playing, not just when they're watching a cinematic.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is that a hard thing for a writer to, like, at the very beginning of being a narrative designer or a game writer? Is that a hard thing to come to grips with, of like, someone could skip this beautiful scene that I wrote?
I think it's probably hard for most people. I haven't been writing in games too long, but I'm actually willing to give up that control if it means the player will have a fun time playing through a thing. If they laugh at one of my lines, that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's what I want. If they overhear something in the middle of combat and they're like, that was funny, success. I've done my job. I think it depends on the person. I think if you're used to, your words being gospel, it might be a little harder to let go. But in game development, you got to kill your darlings a lot of the time. So then it's just a matter of, hey, did this get the reaction that we wanted? Then we did our job.
Yeah, so in that case, it's definitely more like TV writing or film writing, in that you are handing it off, and whatever happens, versus a novel where, theoretically, every word you wrote is up to you. So that's very interesting. I'm curious about that as well. 30. Can you share a favorite elevator dialogue with us?
My god,
that's a great question.
Oh, that is such a great question. Oh my god, we've written so much of it. Oh, my mind is blanking. I'm trying to think of what, because the other thing is I've written so much of it that could also be a spoiler.
Ooh.
So I have to try not to, accidentally spoil things when I'm thinking of elevator dialogue. I think anything that refers to Captain America having, a life outside of Avengers, I appreciate. So, if he mentions that he knows how to dance, old-timey dances, or he mentions, Kamala's comics or Kamala's fan fiction, and that he's, interested in hearing more about her fanfic or that kind of thing, that that really gets to me when Cap can sort of show that he's not all bad. Oh, Nicole just gave me one. Cap's bad at cooking. That is an established thing that we've that we've just set, is that Cap is really bad at cooking. It's actually in Kamala's fanfiction, her Avengers versus the Evil Sewer Lizards. We hint at that fact that Cap is just, everyone knows that Cap sucks at cooking. So anything that can make Cap sort of human, I really like that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, a lot of the elevator dialogue really humanizes. Like, Thor has a bunch of silly dialogue that makes me laugh.
Yeah, we made Thor a character that Kamala likes to go to for advice. So that's really fun. And it makes him a character that everybody really relies on. It's always really fun to give these characters lives outside of the Avengers in those elevator moments. I'm glad people listen to them. That makes me really happy.
I this is not like a comment on the game, but the game loads so fast on PC that it wasn't until I started playing on PlayStation that I even heard the end of any of them.
Oh.
I would be like, well, I wish I knew the punchline of that, and then I'd go punch some things. But yeah, there's some very funny ones. We heard one today that I think we think it was Kate asked Hulk for a joke, and Hulk just responds "you," I guess. And that one cracked us up.
That is either Nicole or Keanu doing that one. Their Kate stuff is hilarious, but so is their Hulk stuff. I think Hulk is the secret jokester. So that's pretty good.
Ooh, I didn't. So, Crazy Fish. I don't know if you can answer this. If you can't, that's fine. But Crazy Fish wants to know what the bet between Kate and Thor is. Is that something that can be told?
Okay. I know what you're talking about, but I also don't want to get it wrong, so I can't answer.
Okay, that's fair. That is.
I know the exact conversation that you were talking about, but I also don't want to get it wrong, and I'm sure my writers will yell at me.
Okay.
If I do.
Well, just know that if there ever needs to be like an official announcement of some of these elevator stories, like. People are interested based on chat right now.
Oh my god! So. If we could release a book of just all elevator dialogue, that would be pretty hilarious.
I think just style it like Kamala wrote it. I think it's
that actually reminds me. There's an entire we put some storylines into the elevator banter, and there's an entire one about a prank war between Tony and Kamala that comes up from time to time, and we've set in stone that basically everyone is on Kamala's side in the prank war.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yep. So there's quite a few running conversations about the prank war and kind of what's going on there. So yeah, no, there's definitely storylines. So if you can, oh God, I wish there was a way for people to see even more of it. But if you're listening to it, you'll end up seeing some continued storylines of stuff that's going on the Chimera.
Yeah, I mean, just based on the way chat is going off, if you just release like a YouTube series of just elevator conversation or something, you're gonna. Oh my God!
Okay, Nicole has given me the actual answer.
Yes.
Thank you, Nicole. So Kate and Thor had an old marksmanship wager before 8-8. So who was a better shot? Him throwing Mjolnir, her shooting an arrow. So that is what the wager is.
Interesting. We got an answer. We did it. Wow. I mean,
so thank you, Nicole.
Yes.
She got that answer for me so that I didn't say the wrong thing.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you allowing my channel to live up to its name, because I feel like people expected a lot with a channel of this name. Like I expected a lot of leaks. So
yeah,
if what we can get is elevator conversations, that's the best. That's the best option in my opinion.
I mean, that is where all of the secrets lie, is really the elevator dialogue. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that this should be done, but like I think PC people wouldn't mind if the game was just like load slower to get that.
Slightly slower.
I'm just absolutely kidding. But it's nice hearing the conversations, because they're pretty funny. So. Well, I guess I've probably used up most of your time at this point, but question I would like to know, I don't know, I was assuming that people would want to know this, but let's say someone wants to get into game writing or narrative design. How do they start? What do they do? What's the path, or what's your path? Because I guess you probably can't say the path.
Yeah, that's the thing about game writing and narrative design, is there isn't one path. Game writing is actually a pretty new part of the video game field. A lot of the time in the olden days, the person who wrote the game was the programmer who could put the sentences together the nicest. So it's a fairly newer part of the games industry. For me, I went to school for screenwriting. So film, TV, all of that stuff. And I was paying my dues in Hollywood. I was a writer's assistant on a web series. And a job at Telltale Games came up that was kind of like a writer's assistant, but for narrative design. And so I applied to that job because I had kind of some experience. And of course, Telltale games are very cinematic. And so I got that job, and then it was a crash course on everything game development and learning as much as I could from everyone. And from every game someone brought up, I would go play. Every movie that was a good comparison, I would go watch. It was just absorbing as much information as I could. I think if anyone wants to get into game writing, being able to write is a good start, but also being able to collaborate for sure is a big thing. And I think that's why, TV writers do so well in games, or can do so well in games, is they're used to working on a team. And a lot of game writing is team-based, not just with other writers, but with the other people on the team, the designers, that kind of stuff. So I know there are people who hate group work in school, but start working in groups, dealing with different personalities, butting heads, and you're going to end up doing quite well in games, knowing how to do that stuff.
Awesome. Let's see. I mean, I guess I was assuming that you only had till 6, or well, I guess it's 3-year time. But
yes.
I guess I was assuming. But yeah, I don't know. I guess what are some of your favorite stories, favorite writers, like just in terms of even outside of comics? What do you like?
I'm a sci-fi girl. I really like reading sci-fi novels. I read a ton of books and comics. I really like young adult novels, which makes sense because Kamala. So Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, pretty much every time they work together, I love everything they write. In terms of game stories, it's hard to pick a writer because it's usually like the stories coming out of a studio that I really like. So, I mean, our friends over at Insomniac are doing some really great work. I love Night School Studio. Pretty much everything that comes out of their studio is really, really great. It's always weird to talk about specific game writers too, because I know them and it feels kind of biased to be like, I think John Stafford is the best writer ever, but he's also my narrative director. So
it'd be a good thing to say that at this point.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, that kind of stuff. When it comes to movies, I don't follow particular storytellers, but I run the gambit. I love romantic comedies that are super predictable, but I also like, Knives Out being, really, really cool. Rian Johnson does some really cool work.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of different stories. I try to absorb as much as I can. I think the only thing that I avoid is horror because I am a wimp.
That's fair.
But yeah, sci-fi, Mass Effect. Oh my God, the Mass Effect series. I love it. I love it so much.
A little excited about the re-release then?
I all caps to my writing team how excited I was about the Legendary Edition, which I have already pre-ordered.
We were talking about Mass Effect before you guys got here, because we unfortunately had a little bug where we got stuck on an elevator endlessly earlier.
Oh no!
And I was like, this feels like Mass Effect, which is a little bit of a snide thing because I love Mass Effect as well. But
yes.
Yeah. Well, great. I don't know, Andy, Hannah, do you guys have anything else you want to share? Anything else? Any questions to grab from chat that are like super urgent? Anything like that? I don't know. I appreciate you guys being here so much. I know Andy has been silent while we talked story and stuff.
He's been very patient with me, just seeing if I spoil anything accidentally. That's right.
No.
Is that why Andy's
still here?
Is that why Andy's here? Just a quick hang up on you?
Yes.
Hang up on you really quick,
like,
just in case.
It looks like Hannah's internet went out.
Interesting. Wow, that's so crazy how that happened.
Yeah, I do need to go back to work soon. It's true.
I figured that I probably should plan on only about an hour, but anytime you want to come back and hang out, Hannah, I think that would be amazing. So
this was so much fun.
Andy, you as well. But Hannah and I have been talking.
Hannah Moore. No, I agree. Hannah Moore.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's. Jeez. So we have a few like community things that like just jokes that we ask, and so we have someone who really wants a scene where Cap has a beard. So
Where Cap has a beard, I will
Yes.
take that back to our character team.
Take that back. Perfect. Okay, there you go. ODG. I got you. But thank you guys so much for hanging out and being here and answering just so many questions. I'm sure we could have quite a few more, but I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm going to hop off. Andy, you can do a graceful exit if you'd like.
Yes, I can hang back just for a little bit, but thanks, Hannah.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Hannah, so much. Seriously.
Yeah, if you guys like that, like I love working with all the entire teams and just different disciplines and everything. So if revealing, I always say Michael. I don't know if you care.
It's in my Twitch bio, so I think people know.
Okay. But yeah, if you ever want, Hannah to come back or Nicole or Keanu or whatever, just let me know. I love these things. I love just sitting here and listening. I think that's more important to have a conversation between you and the writers than to have my opinion on this.
I will say that any time any of them want to be on my show, just I'll drop everything. I got no plans.
It's a pandemic, yeah.
Yeah. I'm. This is what I do all day. So anytime anybody wants to be here, just let me know.
Awesome. Yeah. No, thank you. You are like amazing, by the way. So just want to let you know. I think everyone in chat knows that you're amazing, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, seriously,
and just for being excited about it.
This has been. I mean. This has been getting me through the winter because it's cold and I can't do anything else. So planning this has been a lot of fun. So
are you in like a snowstorm right now?
Like it's basically, so I don't know if you've seen my dog Maisie. My dog is like 20 pounds, one of my dogs, and basically we have snow about as high as her at the moment, but it's about to melt, I think. So and then it's just gonna rain for days, which is great when you have an all white dog. So
interesting.
That's
meanwhile, it's sunny in California, like always.
I lived in related to what Hannah said. I went to school for like screenwriting too, and I actually moved out to LA like straight after college, and then I was like, oh crap, this costs a lot of money, and then I ended up back in Indiana. So
yes, it is.
But yes, it's. I had a whole experience where I worked on a short film and like a 850 watt light got dropped on my head, and it was a whole thing. So it was a whole thing. But yeah. So anyways, I miss the warm weather, but we'll hopefully be there eventually. Maybe someday. So.
Yeah, if you come to California, we'll give you a tour of the studio, if ever that even happens, because of the pandemic.
If the pandemic ends, and I mean that would be incredible. So, well, thank you for helping me set this up, Andy. I really, really appreciate it. This has been so cool. So, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your stream. I don't know if you're going to continue streaming or not, but if you are, have a great rest of the stream.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to head out now.
All right.
Thanks,
Andy.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.